Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. Lovely to have you with us. So my name's Claire. I am the producer of Journeys Festival International in Portsmouth, so I'm based in Portsmouth. I have been with ArtReach for about 3.5 years looking after Journeys Festival International, and it's really changed the festival since I first started, which is really exciting. We've undergone lots of different changes and looking at different directions for the festival and developing things and moving things forward. And particularly, obviously, this year it's been the most different so far. So we'll talk about that in more detail. And Maddie will also introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Maddie. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It's really lovely to see you all. So my name's Maddie. I am the executive producer at ArtReach, and I have been with ArtReach since 2018. So I oversee all of our artistic work. So alongside Journeys Festival International, we also run a festival called Liberty UK, which is an annual festival, touring festival where we explore themes of freedom and democracy and liberty through different art installations, performances, and it sort of takes a slightly different format everywhere we go. So the festival we did last year was in Leicester, which is where ArtReach's main office is based, and we worked with a sculptor to put up a large bronze sculpture in the centre of town, and then we had a large promenade performance with big puppets and drummers. So it sort of shifts and changes and can be different things each year. And then we also run, we do consultancy and event commissioning work. So we work with other organisations to deliver their events or to write business plans, do evaluations, write funding bids, a huge kind of variety of things. So ArtReach, I'll do a kind of brief introduction of ArtReach for those of you who may not know us. We are a national portfolio organisation, so we're funded by the Arts Council. We're also a charity, and we have 3 office spaces. So we're based in Leicester, Manchester and Portsmouth. So Leicester is our kind of main office, and then in Portsmouth is the Journeys Festival Portsmouth office, and in Manchester we have a Journeys Festival office there as well. The company has been running for, I think it's 22 years, but I always forget slightly. And in that time, it kind of has undergone lots of kind of quite big changes. It started predominantly as a consultancy company, so we worked with local authorities, town councils, small to medium-sized businesses, and also did some capital development projects. And now we've moved more towards being kind of festival and event producers alongside the consultancy. So we sort of have two arms which kind of sit together. And I will pass back to Claire, who's going to tell you a little bit more about Journeys Festival International and what that festival's about.
Yes, thank you. So as Maddie mentioned, we deliver the festival in Leicester, Manchester and Portsmouth. It's delivered annually in each city. It started in Leicester in 2013, kind of as a response to the then growing refugee crisis, and a way that we could help platform some voices from refugee communities and kind of support artists from that background in the way that we could as a cultural organisation. In 2016, we had funding to then expand the festival out to 2 other cities, and Manchester and Portsmouth were chosen based on the partnerships that we had in those cities and the response that we had from people. Both Manchester and Portsmouth were overwhelmingly positive about having the festival within their cities and supporting it, which was brilliant. So the festival curates and commissions a real variety of work created by artists to explore the refugee experience and global cultures through artistic and creative encounters. So it takes the form of very, very different events, a huge variety of art forms and interventions. We aim to be really celebratory and explore different cultures and start opening up conversations about migration and movement and borders and culture. We work in each city with a huge variety of partners, and we really couldn't do what we do without those amazing partnerships. So in Portsmouth, that includes places like Aspects are one of our key partners. At the Guildhall, the university, we work really closely with partners like British Red Cross and Friends Without Borders, who are a local charity. We work with City of Sanctuary across all 3 cities as well. So yeah, we're really lucky to have the partners that we do, and we work in lots of different venues across the cities. We don't have kind of a specific space that the festival takes place in. We make use of our partners' venues, and we find new spaces each year to deliver events and installations and exhibitions within. And the festival usually runs for around about 10 days in each city. This year was obviously very different, and it's been the first year that, as 3 festivals with some shared programming, we've really come together and delivered one single shared programmed festival, which has been really exciting and interesting for us. It's been really nice for us and really valuable for us to work more closely as a team, and that's something that we're going to continue to take forward within our work. So this year the festival was 3 weeks long, and we had a variety of different events and exhibitions and online experiences that people could take part in across the 3 weeks. And we will share some links to our website as well, as there are still a few things on there that you can check out and explore that we're still hosting on there. So just to give you an overview of how this session is going to take shape, we are going to give 3 specific examples of projects that we hosted this year as part of the festival. After each example, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions about that specific project or to comment or share your thoughts. Then we'll have a break in between each section as well, just to give people a bit of time to go get a drink or relax. And then we'll have an overall questions and answers session at the end. So if you've got anything you want to ask more generally about the festival or delivering online events, if you can save those questions to the end, but anything specifically that's come up about a particular project, feel free to ask after each section. Okay, so has anyone got any questions at the moment? Great, I'll carry on. So I am going to talk about a project called Sun Up, Rain Falls, River Rises. And this is a project which forms part of our Creative Europe funded project Liberty EU, which is a project that we're running for 3 years with 12 European partners across 10 different European countries. So it's a project that is exploring Brexit in part, European identity and attitudes towards Europe within young people. So we're focusing on working with artists under the age of 30 and new and upcoming artists. So this piece was one that was originally planned to take place physically in Portsmouth, and we were planning to create some sort of sound-led processional piece where people could, listening to the sound, they could move along the seafront in Portsmouth, a kind of a self-guided tour using sound to an installation, a physical installation. We hadn't got very far kind of through that process before everything changed. COVID struck, and we had to drastically rethink how we were going to manage that. So in some ways we were quite lucky with the timings. We hadn't really gone too far down one route, and so we were able to kind of rethink how we wanted to do this. So we started to look at ways that we could adapt this piece and change it so that it didn't rely on people coming to a specific place in the city and being in one specific location. We were also really keen that the piece took people away from their screens. because we were going to be delivering an entirely digital festival, the very, very vast majority of that content was going to be online and would require people to be at their screens, watching or listening or engaging online. So we wanted to find a way that it could be hosted online, but didn't necessarily need to have people sat down in front of their computer and engaging with it. So we came up with the idea of 3 audio pieces that people could listen to whilst walking around their locality, so that people could take those stories with them and listen to them as they walked around, and some stories that could either help highlight their locality in a new way, find a new way of looking at things, or that they could reimagine someone else's story within the surroundings that they're in. So we started to speak to the artists that we wanted to work with about this, and kind of they helped to develop that idea and move it forward. So for the writing part, we worked with Phosphorus Theatre Company, who are a brilliant theatre company if people don't know them. They work with unaccompanied minors who have moved to the UK, and they have toured, I think, 3 productions. They were supposed to tour their 4th production this year, which unfortunately got put on hold. And they use theatre as a way to reclaim their stories and tell their stories in their own words in the way that they want to. So we thought that they would be brilliant at this project and give them an opportunity to do some more in-depth writing. They tend to write their work as a team, and so we were really keen to help focus on some of those more individual voices rather than the voice of the theatre company as a whole. So they came up with 3 different narratives which happened to kind of take place in a different space, or with a different time, or some sort of focus within the piece that we were able to pull out and include as our kind of framework for suggesting how people should listen to and experience those pieces. So one of the pieces was set just after sunrise, and so we suggested that if possible people listen to that just after sunrise to kind of really connect with that experience and that story being shared. One of them was after the rain, which was very easy for most people in the UK to listen to after some rain. And then the 3rd piece was set by water, set by the River Nile. So we suggested people listen to that beside water. So once the pieces had been written, we shared them with a European composer, Mira Segal, and she created new bespoke compositions that responded to and interacted with the recordings. So it created this entire kind of audio experience with words and music that people can listen to. And we also had worked with some illustrators to create illustrated versions of the pieces as well, so that it wasn't just an audio piece. People who couldn't access the audio piece were still able to engage with that in a different way. We created a slightly different piece of artwork for that experience. I think they're beautiful pieces. I loved working on this project. This was one of my favourite ones, although I think I say that about all of them, to be fair, but I did really love working on this project. And it was really nice to see the development of those ideas, working with Phosphorus. We came up with kind of a broad concept for what we wanted, and they really helped us to deliver that and kind of focus a little bit more on the experience for the audiences, so to making them very specific for our recommendations for how they should be engaged with. So I'm going to hopefully share my screen and share my sound, and we can listen to one of the pieces, and I'll show you. Oh, Harriet, would you be able to enable screen sharing? And I'll be able to show you the artwork as well. Okay, so this is the layout of the page. So we wanted to make it kind of easy for people to navigate and to separate the three stories, to keep them separate but kind of unified as one piece. So we're going to listen to After the Rain, which is this middle one here. So I will play the audio down here. I will also open
Let me take you to Miran, a village in Nangarhar province in the east of Afghanistan. Imagine tall houses made from mud standing proudly together. Green fields tenderly planted with many different crops. And watching over everything, the mulberry trees rich with purple fruit. Now, feel the heat from a 40-degree sun that is barely troubled by clouds. So when the rain comes, the joy it brings to this small boy and his friends is priceless. We sit under the mulberry trees on a charpai bed and listen to the drops hitting the leaves. It's the sound of a musical instrument never heard on earth. The rain falls hard and straight like daggers made of glass, hitting the ground and shattering. Then the rain stops just as suddenly and the sun shines again. We run and run through the wet grass in the fields, our dusty feet turning soft and slippery. The blackbirds return in their hundreds, swooping and shrieking out to each other as they take back the sky. The mud walls of the houses darken like caramel, releasing the magical smell that entices children to press our faces close, wishing we could eat the fragrance. We only stop when one of the elders passes by, saying Salamu Alaikum, our expressions innocent, forgetting our muddy noses give us away. The best of all are the mulberry trees, their plump, glistening fruit demanding to be picked. We climb higher and higher to reach the best spot, the black handfuls of the sticky berries, cramming them in our mouths, hands stained red, a beard of juice on our chin. The leaves around us are sparkling, shiny surfaces reflecting the sun like a forest of mirrors. The whole world feels washed and cleansed, except the man standing close against the wall of a house, not smelling, but listening, scanning the roofs of the house for antennae. He has a handful already in his hand, like broken metal flowers. He goes inside. Watching from our tree, we hold our breath. This man has a gun. He comes out holding a TV in his hands, the angles sharp and wrong against his white Peranton as he lifts it and smashes it down. Glass everywhere, real glass. that will stay in the earth for children's tender feet to stand on. He moves from house to house, sly like a snake, collecting people's precious boxes to destroy. The ground is littered with glass, broken plastic, electrical parts. And I remember the reason the village is our playground. Why this boy and his friends play out all day, climbing trees, smelling mad, filling ourselves with the songs of the rain and the blackbirds, is because we are not allowed to do anything else.
Okay, so that is After the Rain, which I think is beautiful. So one of the challenges with this piece was the recordings. Obviously, the writers and the actors who recorded it didn't have their own recording software, and so the quality of the recordings varied depending on what they had access to, and how able they were at using that. Later, during the process of planning and developing the festival, we worked with a media company to create little recording packs that we could send round. So we sent them to our producers to gather some recordings from roots groups that we work with, who are local participants who support the work of the festival. And I think something like that, in hindsight, would have been really useful for kind of making sure that the quality level of the pieces was the same. They all worked out fine, and when you listen you don't really notice it, but I think it would have just kind of enhanced them all to have that same level of recording with them, just to make it standardized across them. But it was a really interesting project to work on, one that was really enjoyable, and working with Mira to respond to the pieces was great. And that's something that as we all got more used to working like this on Zoom, it made that process easier than I think it would have been otherwise, when we weren't used to kind of having virtual meetings and conversations. One thing that was different is that normally we would for something like this, we would want to go and meet the artists and maybe join in some of the workshops and kind of be involved in that process a little bit more, which we weren't as much for this project, because it was much easier for the theatre company to manage that process by themselves. So we weren't as much involved in that. But I'm really pleased with the outcomes for that. So that's kind of an overview of that project. Or Maddie, if there's anything that I've missed that you think we should mention.
No, nothing really for me, other than just, I think one of the really interesting things that we talked about with this project a lot was that sense of how do you create a digital program and not ask people to just continually be looking at their screens. Generally people's kind of full work day is looking at screens. At the time that we were doing this, everyone was socializing, looking at screens. So it felt like people were spending their entire day in front of screens. And we really wanted, normally going to an event or going to a festival is your break away from that. And how could we create an opportunity for audiences to create their own space to experience something away from a screen, so it didn't just feel like they were constantly sort of eyes straight to a screen. So I think this project for us was our opportunity to kind of play with that and see whether people did take that opportunity and actually step away and take those pieces out into nature, which is where we kind of designed them to be heard. So that was, a kind of slightly different approach to the other two examples, which we'll talk about later. So the next project that we're going to talk about is a project called Graffiti, Art and Protest in Iran. And this project was designed as a digital project. It was originally conceived as a virtual reality piece, and it's by an artist called Parham Galamda, who worked in collaboration with Limina Immersive, who are based in Bristol, and they create VR works. They before the pandemic, they had a semi-permanent VR cinema space underneath Watershed. So they worked together to create this piece, and the piece is a recreation of a graffitied water tunnel in Tehran. And the reason we wanted to create this piece was we'd been working with Parham for a number of years, and he's originally from Iran. And when he was in Iran, he collected archival footage and photographs of graffiti across Iran. And he had over 4,000 photographs, and he wanted to do something with them, and he wanted to share them with people. And he wanted to show the types of graffiti and the types of artworks that were shown in public spaces, in public realm in Iran, and the difference between the kind of context in which those exist there and the context in which street art exists in the UK. The work is stylistically very similar and has a lot of similarities. The work that he had done when he was in Iran, he used to be a graffiti artist. He's now an oil painter. The work he does was not overtly political. It wasn't particularly sort of controversial or challenging in its subject matter, but by the fact that it was in public spaces, on walls, made it very controversial in Iran. So in Iran, in the UK, graffiti, if you don't have permission to do it, it generally classifies as vandalism or damage to private property. In Iran, that's not the case. They don't have a law against graffiti in itself. So they classify it as working against the government or working against religion. So it gets classified as terrorism or treason. So much more serious charges, but for very similar work. So Parham really wanted to explore this and explore the types of work that is shown in Iran, and for people to experience that and to understand the culture and the context of Iran by looking at work that feels very familiar to people. So we conceived the idea of creating a VR piece of a water tunnel that he painted with his crew, and we wanted people to be able to feel like they were walking down that space and they were in that space, and to hear Parham talk about the work, but about the artist that he used to paint with, and also the context of that work existing in that space, and to look at that kind of difference between how we experience street art and how it is experienced in Iran. So originally it was going to be a VR piece with headsets, When COVID started, we decided to move away from headsets because we felt that the kind of close physical contact of a headset with people, with multiple people over one day, people wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with. So we moved it into being a desktop piece. So it now exists as a piece online. I'm going to try and show you it, but because it takes a lot of kind of bandwidth, so it might not work, but we'll give it a go and I'll send you the link in case it doesn't. But what we wanted to do was still find a way to create that sense of immersion within a digital space when it was 2D, but it's shown as 3D. So that was where we kind of started, and that was our kind of starting question of how do we do this, and how do we enable people to experience something that no longer exists. So that water tunnel that was painted, the Iranian authorities found out about it and they painted it all over. So they painted it white. So the only record of it is these photographs that Parham has. So by recreating it, we're sort of recreating something that no longer exists. So I'm going to try and share this with you. So let's see if this works. I apologize if it doesn't. Bear with me 2 seconds. So can you see that? Yeah, okay. So this is the kind of beginning of the water tunnel. And you can, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to look around. Is it going to let me look? Yeah, it is. Only a little bit. So there is also sound to this, but I've not turned it on because it can be a bit juddery when you share screen. So I'll just show you the space, but have a look at it yourself in your own time. And there is sound, and there is also on the panels along the edges, as you go past them, they light up, and if you click on them, then you can hear Parham talk a bit more about the work. I'll just give you a quick kind of tour on the piece. So as you can see, the style of work is very similar to things you would see in the UK. But yeah, everyone who was part of painting this was arrested after it was done. So when you look at it, you can also turn and look at more in depth at the pieces. So I won't do it on all of them. This is, we're coming up to a bit of empty wall, which is part of the next phase of development of this project. So we're actually looking to create, so as part of, when Parham was painting these walls, he invited lots of people and artists to come and see them because he wanted to see their reactions. He talks a lot about the use of colour in public spaces in Tehran, and the fact that everything is black and white and grey, so you don't really get much kind of colour. So he really wanted to bring people down to show them this kind of really colourful, bright, vibrant work along this confined space, so they were totally surrounded by colour, which isn't something that happens in public space normally. And when he asked them to come and see it, and he would say, do you want to be part of it, or do you want me to paint something for you? Everybody would always just say, no, I want you to add my name to it. And it was this sense of them wanting to add their name to show that there was kind of support and that they were part of it. So in the next phase of development, people will be able to add their names to this part of the wall to kind of stand with the artists who created this work. And then as we come down here, the size that this has been built at is the size is built to the size that the work was. So you can see the kind of scale there was. I don't know if this is being really glitchy for you or whether it's doing it smoothly on my computer, but I can't tell if it is on yours. So I'm sorry if it's really jarring. Anyway, as you get to the end of this, Parham talks about kind of what happened towards the end of them painting this. And then once you get to the end, there's a final artwork right at the end, which you see. And then when you turn around, all of the base has been painted back over white. So all of the work disappears. It goes to the state that it currently is now. That's the final piece up there. Hopefully you can see. And that's it flashing, which means I can click on it for you to hear it. I won't do that because I'm not showing my sound. But yeah, that's the piece. And I guess the thing for us with this piece was that it was conceived as a kind of traditionally digital piece. It was always going to exist in a digital format. The thing we changed was the platform that it was kind of viewed on, and what we wanted to look at was how does that change how you interact with it. Obviously it's very different from it being completely around you. It feels a little bit more like you're in a video game and you're able to sort of like move back and forth, but you don't have the sense of sort of there is kind of full 360 and you can turn and look in different directions, but it's obviously done by pressing buttons as opposed to turning your head. So what we really wanted to understand was how audiences could interact with it on screens and how we could still have that sense of being in that space. Obviously, with all digital projects, I think this is always a slight thing, is people's internet speed and their ability to run programs through their computer massively impacts your ability and your experience of this work, which is something that we're sort of looking into. And like I said, this is the sort of first phase of this piece, and we're looking to continue to develop it, and hopefully one day it will become a VR headset piece, but we're waiting for the world to allow us to do that again. And similarly with the piece that Claire talked about, everybody worked remotely to make this piece. So we were working with a VR company based in Bristol. Parham was in Manchester. We worked with the director on it. He's based in London, and we worked with musicians who are based in Iran. So all of them have never met in person. They've only ever met on Zoom. And they created this piece by kind of sending voice notes to each other. So all of the recordings, when you do go in and listen to the recordings, are Parham being interviewed over the phone and recording voice notes to make that element of the piece. For us, the big thing with this piece is showing that if you experience that piece without knowing the context of it, you could be anywhere in the world. But the kind of cultural significance and the context of it is kind of what gives it its power, because a lot of the work feels very familiar, but the implication of that work being painted was so different to how we would experience it.
So I am going to be talking about a piece called Beauty for Ashes. So this is by an artist called Susan Kamara. And Susan is an artist based in Southampton, and someone who I had met I think right at the start of the year or towards the end of last year. I met her, and Susan is she's not a professional artist working full-time as an artist. She works for the NHS, but does her artwork kind of on the side. And she initially started to create work as part of a project run by the textile artist Alice Kettle. And Alice had a major exhibition at the Whitworth called Thread Bearing Witness. And some of the work that was made by participants as part of that project was exhibited in the Whitworth, including Susan's work. So Susan is a multimedia artist. She works with a lot of different materials. She does a lot of textile work, and everything she does does by hand in her spare time around her NHS shifts, which I find just amazing. So I initially started having this conversation with Susan, as I say, towards the end of last year, the start of this year, and was hoping to exhibit her work as part of the Portsmouth Festival in 2020. I really wanted to support her and I still do want to support her in her development as an artist, to kind of help her find new opportunities and to get her name and her work out there, and find herself more as an artist. So I was really keen to be able to support her this year, and was hoping to have an exhibition of her work, kind of her first solo exhibition in the festival, which I was really excited about. That obviously didn't become possible in the circumstances, but I still really wanted to work with her and to be able to share her work in some capacity within the new festival structure that we were looking at. So this piece was one of, if not the only piece that we managed to have a physical version as well, Maddie. I think this was the only one, wasn't it, in the end? We had a couple of pieces that we hoped to have kind of digital and physical versions of, that people could visit in some capacity. But for various reasons, this is the only one that actually managed to achieve that, which is amazing. So we had, so Beauty for Ashes is the name of Susan's piece that we exhibited. So we ended up having the physical version exhibited in Leicester Hospital, which was brilliant. They were really enthusiastic about having it, and it's a really nice link with Susan's work as well, to celebrate her within a hospital space, particularly given everything that's going on at the moment, and kind of frontline workers, being able to support them in a small way with some artwork in their working space was great. So the piece was had to be posted around, so it was posted. Alice was holding the work, Alice Kettle, so it was posted up to Leicester, where it was installed in the hospital, and it's been incredibly well received. It was only supposed to be up for the duration of the festival, so but it put up just before and coming down just after that 3-week period. But the hospital have loved having it so much that they asked for an extension on that, so it's actually still up in the space, which is fantastic, and we're really pleased for Susan that it's been so well received and people have been so positive about it. And on the day that it was going up, Maddie was at the hospital watching it being installed, and even just in that short period where Maddie was there were loads of comments and people stopping and kind of sharing their really positive thoughts on it. So that was great. So we had that physical version, which is much more like the traditional exhibiting that we're used to, getting the artwork, finding a way to put it on the wall and letting people come and look at it. And we had to find a new way to exhibit it in a digital format. And the final solution that we finally reached took quite a while to reach. And initially we were looking at having an exhibition of several of Susan's pieces and trying to find a way that would be interesting to share them. And in the end, we had a couple of different ways that we exhibited work, and some of them are still on the website, so when we share the link you can go and have a look at some of those. But in the end, what we decided to do for this piece is, because we were just having one of Susan's pieces exhibited in the physical space, we decided to focus on that one piece for the online exhibition, and to really try and make that experience of that artwork as interesting and engaging and as in depth as possible. And so we wanted to create an experience that gave the audience, because they were losing that physicality of seeing a piece and being able to examine it up close on their own, you know, with the piece in front of them. We wanted to be able to enhance that experience, to give them other opportunities, things that extra information, extra experiences that you wouldn't necessarily have in a physical exhibition, kind of that giving it more layers of depth and information. So we worked with a company who do a lot of kind of augmented reality, I think it is, they do a lot of, to create a digital version of the piece that allows you to go into it and select different bits of information on it. So I will share my screen to show you, because that'll be much clearer than me trying to talk about it. So bear with me and let me just share it. So this is the final piece. It's just hosted within our website, and then you can. So we had kind of two versions of the piece that we hosted. So this is the initial one that you come across. So you can see these icons here. So they come up with the different sections of information. So I had a really lovely day where I got to go to Southampton and interview Susan, socially distanced, and gather loads and loads of information about the piece, about her inspiration behind it, the process for making it. It was fascinating, and there is so much more information that I could have included in this, but I didn't want to overwhelm it with with too much information, so I tried to pull out kind of the most interesting parts. And I've tried to get a mix of information about the process and Susan's inspiration, but also some of the textile techniques for people who are specifically interested in textile art. So there's a few different types of information points. So you have ones like this that pop up with just written information for the audience member to read. So this one, again, is a bit of a longer piece, so it comes up kind of as a separate box. And then a few others, like I think this one, have embedded videos within it. So it has a bit of text and then a section of Susan speaking as well. And we also had, I'll play that in a second, we also had an introduction video on the very first page on the website, so that audiences could also engage with Susan in that way as well. So there's the introduction video gives a little bit more information just about Susan as an artist and as an individual, so a much more kind of overview to her and her work, whereas the clips that we pulled out for this are very specific to the piece itself. So I'll just play this to give you a sense of what they're like.
For example, you know, like a baby in the womb. So you're like curled up within yourself. You're not yet born to the world. You're full of despair and you're crying out for help. But there's no help around you. That's what I wanted to portray on the first figure.
So here, Susan is speaking about this figure here. So you can see a head held in someone's hand. So there's their hand and arm, and they're kneeling on the ground. So she talked me through each of the figures and kind of what they meant and the journey that these figures go on, and it's reflective of Susan's own personal journey and also the journeys of many people who have gone through the asylum seeking process and forced migration. And colour is something that is really important to Susan. So you can see the colour progressed from kind of these oranges and brown colours through to blue and to purple, and each has a significant meaning for her. So some of the other points as well came up with zoomed in images. So if it was referring to a specific part of the piece or a specific technique, we were able to embed close-ups for people to really reference what that was, so that people had an understanding of exactly what section or what element we were talking about. So I think there were about 10 points on here that people can flick through and read the information and kind of get different bits from. And then as well as this, because this is incredibly useful for kind of some of that background information and understanding the depth of the piece, but we also wanted to have a piece that was similar to how you would experience a piece in person, so without the distraction of having icons on the piece itself. So you can flick through to the next one, and this is just the piece without any extra information, and you can zoom in, I mean, to amazing detail really. And these images, we were really lucky, these were images that were taken as part of Alice Kettle's project and initial exhibition. These were taken as part of that, so these were incredibly high quality professional images that we were able to use, and we didn't need to take any extra images ourselves, so we were quite lucky with that. So yes, this gives people the opportunity to kind of zoom in and look in more detail at some of the elements and the sections of the piece that interest them, as well as being able to kind of follow Susan's narrative of the piece as well in the other version. So these are, this is the online presentation. So I will stop sharing my screen. Yes, so I'm really pleased with how the digital version worked. I think being able to offer audiences an enhanced experience kind of removes some of the limitations to not being able to have the physical piece in front of you. It gives people more to be able to engage with, a greater understanding of the piece. The piece that we exhibited in the hospital, whilst it has, you know, the information panel that gives as much information as we can, you know, you're not able to go into as much depth on them. So actually the digital audiences got more information and more background and more understanding of the piece than in its physical form. And we also signposted people at the physical version to the online version for more information as well, and for the interview with Susan. And we had amazing response to the piece, as I said. We had Susan did an interview on BBC Radio Leicester as well, which was great. And the hospital were really interested and really supportive of the piece, and kind of helped to share that amongst their staff and people using the hospital as well. So I think that's everything on that piece.
I can kind of talk a little bit about kind of what we've learned through this process and our kind of reflections on it. And then we're sort of running a bit ahead of time, but then we can do questions. So I guess we've kind of shown you 3 elements of work as part of the programme. As Claire said, lots of the other elements of the programme are still on our website. So we can send you a link to all of those. And there's lots of different examples of different types of events. The reasons we selected these 3 to sort of talk to you about was, one of them was a piece that was supposed to be delivered in person, and we kind of translated it to be an online piece in it, kind of then designed to be online. One was a digital piece which was designed to be digital, and the other was a kind of online sharing of something that really should have been physical, but is trying to find a way to create an experience that enhances what you would get from seeing it physically. So hopefully it's given you a kind of sense of different ways of presenting work online and digitally. But also through the programme, we also worked with 3D animators who created a 3D piece. So that's called Down Upside. So that's another one to look at, which again is a kind of fully digital project, and was always going to be shown in that context. We also had kind of lots of film work. So we ran a film program of films, but then also we commissioned artists to create short films that were kind of artworks in themselves, and then also we created films of people performing. So there's sort of lots of different versions and modes and ways of showing it, and I think for us the big thing was trying to find that balance between kind of passive and interactive interactions with the pieces. So whether it's kind of sitting and watching a film of something, or exploring an artwork where you can kind of click through and be drawn in and kind of take from it as much as you want to. So you could look at it as a whole and experience it that way, but if you want to get more in depth, then you have that opportunity to. And I think for us it was trying to find that different access routes for different bits of work, and that's something that I think we will continue to sort of develop once we are able to develop work in person, of having those multiple access points to work and having sort of hybrid models where work happens in person and digitally, and that digital audiences can experience it in one way and in-person audiences experience it in a slightly different way. So you gain a different perspective on the work, or you have a different reaction to it based on how you engage with it. Because obviously the big advantages with digital work is that it can be accessed from anywhere in the world. It can exist there forever. And it can continue to sort of be experienced, and for us to kind of share it with people. In person, obviously it's in that moment, and it's that sense of experiencing it because you were there at that time, and that being a really special thing to have experienced. So again, it's that sort of finding a way for the existence of one not to diminish the experience of the other. So thinking about those different kind of models of how you want to share the work that I think quite a lot of people who are in the room are artists, from looking at your responses when you signed up. So yeah, thinking about the audience experience that you want them to have and what you want them to take away from it, and thinking about what is the thing that they get from seeing it in person and being in front of it, or touching it, or moving amongst it, and what is the experience that somebody gets from being able to spend a lot more time with it and being able to see it in a way that you wouldn't necessarily be able to see it if you were in person. And a big thing is also kind of platforms. So what platforms do these things exist on? Most platforms will be able to be integrated into websites, but a big thing that across all of the work we've done, kind of putting events and artworks online, is thinking about how do audiences navigate their way through that space. The website, the internet is full of stuff. You know, people can get very lost and they can go down rabbit holes. And how do you get people to find the work that you're putting on, or the work that you want them to see, and what's their journey to that page or to that artwork? And then the other side of it is also, how do you combine these experiences which are screen based and are about seeing something on a screen, and something that is digital that takes you away from a screen. And obviously audio is an amazing tool for that, but again, what do you kind of gain and lose by being in front of a screen and being away from a screen? And again, it always comes back to kind of, what do you want your audience to take away from that work? Do you want it to be, is it about kind of giving them information or provoking them to think about something, or is it about getting them to sort of take themselves out of their everyday lives and to feel something and to think differently? So those are the kind of things, those are our sort of reflections. None of that is answers to any of it. It's mainly more questions, and it's more thinking about it. It feels like with the delivery of online events, and people are starting to become more savvy with how to access these things and how to experience them. But how do you kind of navigate your way through that and create something that is multi-layered and isn't just kind of one mode, and it isn't just, you know, films of something or it's all audio, but how do you create a kind of multi-layered experience for people? And yeah, that was kind of mainly our reflections on it. And, you know, there was lots of learning in terms of digital and what can be done and what can't be done. We came up with lots of ideas that were completely impossible. I'm sure by next year they will be possible, because technology moves so fast and everybody is constantly innovating. But yeah, has anyone got any kind of broader questions about the festival, about ArtReach, about the artists we work with? Anything like that?
I have, well, you answered most of my questions actually, but I've got a question for both you, Maddie, and Claire. I was just wondering, not necessarily what your favourite artwork or experience was in the festival, but like what your favourite like format of artwork to consume that was involved in the festival, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. I think for me, it was any of the artworks where you had to kind of take yourself out of a routine or out of just kind of pressing play and watching something. So another piece we had in the festival was a one-to-one performance over Zoom, and you drew on your arm during the piece, and so you were talking to the artist and he instructed you how to do it, and then he played a really beautiful soundscape and video. And I think those pieces where you couldn't just sort of do it on the side, for me, that format of having to be totally engrossed and having to really pay attention, for me, those were my favorite ones. Claire, what about you?
It's kind of similar. For me, it was ones where we could, in some capacity, actually interact with the audience, because one thing we all found very unnerving producing a digital festival is that you did all this work and you put everything online, and then that was that. And we're used to having audiences that come and talk to us, and that we experience the work with them, and you have that kind of instant interaction and feedback with people. And it doesn't happen in the same way with a lot of the work that was hosted on the website. So things like workshops, or we had a poetry performance with Inua Ellams, and we didn't physically see people, but people were commenting in the chat and sharing ideas and thoughts. And we had live music, live recorded music on Friday evenings that people were commenting on. So anything that had actual kind of interaction and real connectivity with people, I really enjoyed, just because you get a bit more of that kind of festival and audience buzz from them. Yeah, so that's for me.
It says, do you have any idea how many people went into nature to enjoy the first piece? I think it's very interesting to have a digital piece that people carry around. Was there something about the festival format that worked stimulating for people to actually go out? Claire, do you want to answer that?
Good question. I don't know that we do know. We have we had a feedback form on kind of the links to each page for people to go and complete, but it was kind of a generic one for the festival or for specific projects. So we didn't have a specific question about whether people were going out. So unless people commented on that kind of in one of the comment boxes, we don't know. And actually, it would be really nice to have more of a sense. This is a piece that we're hoping to kind of reuse in the future, so we'll have hopefully more of an idea as we move forward with that piece, how many people engage with that in that way. But we don't have specific feedback about that, I don't think.
I think in terms of the second part of your question around kind of the festival format being about encouraging people to go out and to be a kind of away from screens, that was probably, I mean, that was, yeah, probably the only piece that did that specifically, but it's definitely something that as we're developing, so we're kind of 90% programmed to the festival next year, and it's something we've really kind of taken on and really want to explore in the festival next year about, you know, also the kind of use of public space. So where are people going out now? Where are we used to do a lot of work in city centres, so we would do kind of large scale outdoor exhibitions in city centres. So we'd use the outsides of shops and cafes and bars, and we'd work with the theatres and cinemas, and we'd put really big work on the outside of their buildings. But people aren't in the city centre anymore, and so where kind of trying to find out where people are now, and actually, the places that it's busiest is parks and nature, and how do we start to get work into those spaces, or get people to take work into those spaces themselves, I think is a really interesting question, and I think is something that there's such a shift away from kind of people spending time in urban environments to being kind of more in countryside. And I think trying to find the way at the moment, kind of work in rural settings and work in even just in kind of suburbs is so much less than in city centres. And I think it's an interesting shift. So we didn't do it on purpose, but we might do in the future.
The beautiful and diverse work in all 3 digital representations of artwork. Can you recommend platforms to use to create experiences like that?
Yes. So the first piece is actually just so the audio, and it's just an audio file and PDF. So it's just hosted within a website. So our website is just a Wix website. So that one is quite straightforward. The VR piece, so the desktop piece, I can't remember the name of the software they use, I'm afraid, but I can find out, and if people specifically want to know, I can send you more information about it. But yeah, for that we worked with Limina Immersive, who are experts in using that, and similarly we got it so that it would integrate straight into a web page. So we created a new web page to host that one, and then the final one, so Beauty for Ashes, we worked with a company so the technology that was used to create that was the same that you use for 360 photographs, which often get used at the moment they're getting used a lot by estate agents to show you houses. So it's the same process as that. So they take a photograph and then they can add the pins in. So if anyone's done digital house viewings, it's the same process as that. So we actually worked with a company who do a lot of house viewings through their stuff.
It's hosted on through something called Genial, which I think is what they use to create that.
Is there anything that like you've done this year that you just never would have imagined you'd do with this festival? Things that have like been completely unexpected that you've like adapted to doing?
I think not having a live audience at any point in time is a really big one. So much of our work is about kind of bringing people together and sparking conversations and sort of trying to give people different perspectives. And a lot of our work does kind of evolve around kind of storytelling and stories and people's experiences, and lots of that can be quite personal. And so lots of the time our work is about being in quite intimate spaces with people and very kind of gently navigating those conversations and really sort of looking after people's pastoral care in those spaces. And that element of kind of pastoral care is not really possible online, because you don't know what frame of mind people are in when they are going to experience work. You don't know what's their kind of what's happening around them and their context and what they're bringing to that space and to that piece. So we have had to really shift how we present the work that is slightly more kind of emotive and potentially kind of the work that's harder to watch, because like Claire said, you know, when things go up online, it just exists there and you don't get that sense of being able to have conversations. I don't think I ever would have imagined running an event where I wasn't going to have some level of conversation with artists and audiences at the moment that something happened. That was a real shock.
So there's another message in the chat. Can you speak a little more on ArtReach and how to encourage the public to get a little more active in participation and interaction in terms of festival activities or art creation / curation?
Yeah, of course. I'll start with, yeah, I can. Sorry, I was trying to work out which way to approach this. So I guess in terms of ArtReach, do you want me to talk more about the company, like what other activities we do and that kind of side? I'll pause so you can type. Yeah, okay, great. So as I said at the beginning, we have kind of two kind of core activities. One is to kind of produce and deliver our own festivals. So those festivals, we commission work or program existing work. We do quite a lot of artist development. So we work with artists over quite a long period of time across multiple projects. And we sort of develop, with them, we develop artworks from the kind of idea stage through to delivery. We also sometimes support them to tour the work. And both the festivals, so Liberty and Journeys Festival International, there's always a kind of the core program will be artists that have a kind of ongoing relationship with us and an ongoing relationship with our audiences and partners, that we're sort of going on a bit of a journey with to help develop them and also kind of ourselves and to learn from them. And a lot of that is about collaborations. So an example of that would be kind of Parham working with Limina. So Parham had only ever worked kind of 2D, so he was a graffiti artist, used to do lots of murals. He's now an oil painter. His work had always been kind of paint on canvas or paint on wall. So to take him away from that at a point where exhibitions weren't happening in person, to think about how his work existed in a digital space was the sort of the trigger for us to bring those two companies together, well, those two artists together to make something. So a big part of our work is around that. And then on the kind of consultancy side, the consultancy side is sort of again split into two separate areas. One is delivering events, so we get brought in as event managers. So examples of that work, so last year in March we delivered Light Up Leicester, which was the first kind of large-scale light festival in Leicester, which is now set to be a biannual event. And that we commissioned 4 new artworks and toured in 3 international large-scale pieces. So there were 7 artworks across the city over 3 days, and we had over 60,000 people come out. And it was actually, obviously we didn't know this at the time, but the weekend before lockdown. So it was the last moment that actually it was the last event we delivered, but also lots of the businesses we talked to. So we delivered that in partnership with the City Council and the Business Improvement District. And all of the businesses that part of the Business Improvement District said they've kind of totally thrown all of their balance sheets because they had this huge spike of activity in March and then everything went quiet. So that was well timed in a way. But and also we've worked for a number of years in Corby, so we work with Corby Cube and Made with Many. And we've delivered festivals with them. So again, last year in February, we delivered Grow Festival, which was a weekend event that had an illuminated sculpture trail and a fire garden and kind of street performances. We took over empty shops and we put a large installation into the theatre space. So those events, we kind of get approached by a client who says they want someone to come in and support them on event delivery. And then we sort of program and commission the work in collaboration. And then we kind of do all of the risk assessments and all of the logistical side of things. And then we're the sort of boots on the ground delivering over the weekend or the week, however long the event is. And then the other side of our consultancy work is based around kind of business planning, cultural development strategies, and fundraising, evaluation, things like that. So in those circumstances, we either work with organisations, individual organisations, and we come in and we sort of look at their business and we look at what their areas of growth are, where the kind of direction they want to go in, and help kind of support them to build a strategy to deliver those events. Sometimes we then go on to manage those events with them. Other times we just help them sort of get them set up and running. But we also work in that capacity with quite a lot of kind of borough councils or local councils or town councils to write strategies for how they want to embed arts and culture into the area. So we've worked in lots of places, like we did one with Luton, we've done one with Reading, we're currently in the middle of doing one with the Fenlands district, and that's all about kind of trying to work out what infrastructure is there, so doing kind of large mapping exercises of what is currently available in those areas, where is the desire to kind of support work and to support artworks, and then to sort of do lots of consultation sessions where the public come in, artists come in, arts organisations, city councils, businesses, kind of all come together and say, what would it look like if we had an art strategy, and what would we want the outcome of that to be? And then we sort of write that up for them, and then they use that as the basis to either get support from local government or to apply for funding. So that is the kind of ArtReach side of it. In terms of kind of participation and interaction, I think with the festival activity, then we lots of the work is around kind of interaction. Even if it is about sort of viewing something, it's still about the interaction between audiences and between us and audiences and artists and audiences. But I think the way, the question was, how do we encourage it? I think it's by a huge part of it is kind of creating the spaces where those conversations can happen. And a lot of it is about lots of organisations talk about kind of safe spaces, but how do you create spaces where people feel comfortable, where people feel like it's okay to ask questions? One of the programs we used to run was called Coffee Shop Conversations, and it was about going into a coffee shop with an artist and a kind of small group of people, having tea and cake and talking about a topic. But the amazing thing with that is it allowed people to ask questions that they thought they weren't really allowed to ask, but they really wanted to know, because you kind of create this space where it feels like you're sat around a table with friends, even though none of you know each other. And the artists that we work with for those events, and we always had a kind of support organisation with us, so British Red Cross or City of Sanctuary, to answer kind of technical questions, because lots of very technical questions often come up. And it meant that people kind of were very honest, and just kind of, that was the point that it felt like we really kind of changed people's perspectives the most, and that was really exciting. In terms of creation and curation, Claire, do you want to talk about that? I feel like I'm talking lots.
Well, I was just going to add one thing I think that a digital format allows you to do is allows people different levels of interaction, and you're talking about that safe space, and actually a space in which you have to physically put your hand up or speak in public can be really intimidating, whereas a format where you can just ask a question in a chat like we're doing today is a lot less intimidating, and you're not being watched by people, and I think that's a really nice way that we can encourage people to engage that might not otherwise. And I think in all events, whether they're online or offline, having different levels of interaction, so audiences can choose to what extent they engage with something, and always having kind of another level that they can get to, another person that they can speak to, another way that they can comment or engage with the work, whilst also having kind of that very basic level that people can do, then encourages kind of incremental steps to engaging with art. I guess in terms of creation, we tried to get a real mix of the different ways that people were interacting. We have the pieces that are very much just the audience member can come, engage with the work and leave again, and then those pieces that required a lot more interaction. So Maddie mentioned the one-on-one piece, which is obviously a lot more kind of personal engagement with the artist and kind of bringing yourself physically via camera into that space with the artist. So I think it was just creating lots of different ways that people could interact, or they could come to a workshop and they could be in that space, but they didn't have to have their camera on. So just giving people options for how they wanted to engage and what made them feel kind of safe and secure in engaging, and then hopefully that encourages more as people enjoy it and find out that it's not that scary after all. Okay, we've got another question. You talked a bit about the festival buzz. Of course, during lockdown, there isn't a lot of contact between people. Were there, during this edition, points where visitors could connect? Do you have any idea how people experience the 3 weeks compared to the usual format? Yeah, so there were workshops, I guess, were the biggest points of connection during the festival. So we ran several workshops. Do you know how many workshops we ran, Maddie? It was at least one every week.
Yeah, I think it was 3, so it was one a week, led by artists. Yeah,
so we had three workshops where participants could interact with each other and the artist and share questions, ask questions, engage with artwork. Several of the workshops were making things, so people kind of came and created the entire thing in this virtual space together and kind of created those connections that way. Do you want to take the next question, Maddie?
The answer is we don't know at the moment. So we're still in the process of kind of getting all of the kind of evaluation data from everything. And actually, I think Claire said earlier, one of the biggest challenges actually with running something online is that kind of lack of feedback and that lack of understanding of how people have engaged with things. So once we've kind of collated all of the data from the evaluation, we will get a sense of how many events people attended. So one of the questions is the number of events you've attended. So we'll get a sense of whether people did kind of stick with the festival over the 3 weeks or whether they didn't and they just kind of came in and out. One of the things we did try and do to sort of encourage that sense of the festival being across 3 weeks but being connected was we released everything in chapters. So the first chapter, and they were kind of themed. So the first chapter was more about the kind of context and the world, the kind of the current context, particularly for refugees and asylum seekers in the world at the moment. And a lot of the work also talked about coronavirus and lockdowns and the sort of impact of that on them as artists, but also on the community more widely. And then the middle chapter was about how kind of art and creativity can help sort of process those different experiences and kind of people's experiences across their lives. So there was a lot of work in that, which was around kind of personal experiences and ways that people had taken things that had happened to them in their lives and sort of changed them into work and kind of come to positive spaces through that process. And then the last week was all about kind of hope and celebration, and it was about celebrating multicultural communities and how do we sort of share each other's traditions and appreciate and kind of get involved with kind of world culture. So we sort of tried to create a little bit of a kind of journey and a narrative through the festival to kind of get people to engage across the 3 weeks. But we are still working on sort of understanding whether that happened or not. Anyone else got any other questions? Cool. Claire, anything else you'd like to say? In summary.
I don't think so. I think the only thing we haven't kind of talked about that was really different with this festival was international audience. because we were able to reach audiences across the UK, and I think it was about a third of our audience was outside of the UK as well, which is really different and something that's you know, only really possible in a digital format. So that's something that was a really nice surprise at the end when we started looking at data and saw how far we had reached and how many different countries had kind of engaged with what we do. But I think we've kind of we've covered everything. It was a really different experience, and there is a lot of learning that we will take forward, like Maddie was saying, about thinking about how we can have different points of access to the work, and having different formats of pieces that we can share moving forward. And I think also just how we work as a team has changed drastically this year, and will kind of continue to be different as we move forward and work more collaboratively across the teams in the three cities in kind of a slightly different way than how we had before, because geography and location doesn't mean quite the same as it used to.